Okay.
Call to order. The regular board meeting of the Governing Board of Trustees of the Romoland School District is called to order at 5:30 p.m. We're going to do roll call. Mr. Geary,
Here.
Mrs. Kleitz,
Here.
Mr. Reller,
Here.
Mr. Sperry will be joining us later, and then Mrs. Moon here. Nikki, do we have any comments for closed session?
No, we do not.
Okay, then closed session is called at 5:31 p.m. to discuss public employee discipline, dismissal, release, negotiations, and student disciplinary matters.
Carol, can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can.
I don't know if we've started streaming yet, but is there a couple people we need to introduce to our board that are in our meetings?
Yes, would you like that done at the beginning of the meeting or when it's time for the
I just
agenda?
wanted to make sure I knew who was in the meeting. That was all.
Okay. We should have Joy Coomer joining us at some point, and then Doug Floyd, Scott Koppel, and Clarissa Pack will be joining us as well.
Okay, I see Clarissa and Doug in here already, so.
And Vince will do the countdown.
Okay, you're good.
The regular board meeting of Romoland School District reconvenes at 6:32. Manny, was there any action in closed session?
No action taken.
Okay, then we're going to say the Pledge of Allegiance. And I'll go ahead and start. I pledge of allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'm going to review the governance norms. We agree to act with dignity, respect the differences, build trust, work as a team, engage the public, focus on the success of every student, and work together for the common good. I'm going to call on our governing board of trustees for the report. Mr. Aguirre.
Nothing to report.
Mrs. Kleitz.
I have nothing to report.
Mr. Reller.
Yes. Debbie and I and Trevor had an opportunity to participate and listen to a budget workshop, and very interesting where the budget's going. I know it is going, hopefully be adopted here soon. Is that and here in June, the state budget and the May revise and all those things circling around our state's economy. And it's going to be very difficult for a lot of districts in this state to ensure their fiscal stability. But from my understanding of our budget and the relationships that we have with our bargaining units, we will be able to manage this over the next few years. There will be, I think, some roadblocks and some bumps that we need to work together as a team to overcome, but we are in a much better place because of our fiscal responsibility over the last 10 to 15 years to maintain the things that we're doing in the district. Also, I'm on CSBA Delegate Assembly, and I don't know if I reported on this last month, but I met as a delegate assembly, and the delegate assembly voted to take no stance on the November ballot issue that taxes businesses and their property, like Prop 13 taxes into our property, our homes and things like that, property tax. There was some really good discussion about the topic, but the delegate assembly went both ways. We voted on a support, we voted on a not support, and neither passed. And then we voted on a take no stance, and that passed overwhelmingly. So CSBA will not be taking any stance on the upcoming ballot measure for increasing taxes on businesses and corporations and things like that. Because when we sell our houses, it's changing hands, and that is when the tax rate goes up. Businesses and corporations, there's all kinds of different rules and laws in that, and sometimes they're not charged a higher tax rate when their businesses change hands. So I'm not an attorney or a tax person, but from what was presented to the delegate assembly, we decided not to take any stance on that based upon our uncertain feelings about our economy here in the state of California.
Thank you, Gary, for sharing. I wanted to, Mr. Sperry's hasn't been able to join us, but I did want to recognize Romoland. Let's see here, I have it down. Well, first, our nutrition services. We, in the month of May, almost every week in the last 3 weeks of the May, we did over or distributed more than 12,500 meals a week, which I thought was absolutely wonderful. And that's increased since March. Back in March, it was only 4,400 meals. So, and then week 10, we were over 12,000 meals the last 3 weeks. So I think that's terrific that our community is being helped out with having some food that they may have difficulty getting a hold of in these pandemic times. I also want to acknowledge Romoland Elementary being named the Lighthouse School. They have been the last few years, but they were actually given this highest honor for a leader in me, and typically it takes 4 to 5 years to attain. So I really want to congratulate all of Romoland faculty and administrators. There's only 300 schools worldwide that have achieved this status. So congratulations. And now I'm going to call on the superintendent's report. Mr. Payton.
Thank you, Ms. Moon. I just have a list of people I want to thank. Last week was the last week of school, and all of the school sites and the staff at all the school sites really worked hard to create, some meaningful learning experiences during the closures, but also as to bring closure to the school year. They were providing end of the year celebrations for our students and our parents and guardians. Each site kind of designed their own special tributes to students, and the feedback in the community were very appreciative. Our counselors and mental health therapists during the school closures and supporting the social emotional needs of students during this time. So a shout out to them for making sure that they were reaching out to kids that they were seeing while we were in school, and not just letting those kids kind of fend for themselves during the school closures. We also had Miss Giroux and Miss Areola and the staff that work with our English learners created a virtual English learner redesignation ceremony for our 44 English learners that worked so hard to demonstrate fluency in English over the course of the year. And so that's usually a big celebration at the end of the year in our district, and we did that virtually this year. To Ms. Moon's point about the meals served, I took a little bit different approach. Since the school closures, our nutrition services department served over 104,000 meals in our community. So that's great. And they have already transitioned into summer meals now. So the summer meal program. So they continue their great work. And then last but not least, our attendance clerks who have been working from home and supporting our parents and guardians in the online registration process. It's been fabulous. We've been worried about that because a lot of times parents come into the schools for assistance. And as of my check a few days ago, we actually had more students registered than at the same point last year. And we did it all virtually. And that's, their attention to detail and the support they're providing to our parents and guardians. And I'm sorry if I left some people out because everyone pulled together during this last few months on the school closures, and everyone worked as a team, and it's very much appreciated.
Thank you, Mr. Payton. We're going to move on to communications, public comments, and associations. Nikki, do we have any public comments?
No, we do not.
All right. We are going to move on to employee association reports. John, do we have any association reports, or Mr. Murray?
We do not this evening. Thank you.
Okay. And for Romoland Teachers Association, no, and
Correct. Neither CSCA or RTA.
okay, thank you. Notice of public hearing. We have J-1 2020-2021 budget for Romoland School District. Prior to the adoption, Nikki, do I have you share comments, or I just go ahead? Prior to adoption, the Romoland School District Board of Trustees is required to conduct a public hearing to receive comments regarding the 2020-2021 budget. I would like to welcome everyone and declare this public hearing open. At this time, the Board of Trustees will receive comments on the 2021 proposed budget. Were there any members of the public who submitted comments regarding this matter? Nikki?
No, there were not.
Okay. Seeing there are no further comments, I hereby declare the public hearing closed. Information sessions items. We have K1 COVID-19 operations written report overview. Ms. Wise to introduce this item.
Yes, I think Vince will be putting the presentation up. And he'll be my driver scrolling through it too. Thank you, Vince. So at this time of year, I'm normally sharing about the LCAP draft. We normally have a public hearing about that at this meeting, and then the last June meeting, the LCAP comes to you for approval. This year it's slightly different because of COVID-19. And so I'll be presenting about what's called the COVID-19 operations written report. That is a requirement for us to do this year in lieu of the LCAP at this time in June. And so this is an overview of that document, which I will be bringing for your approval at the next board meeting in June. Next slide, please. This is based on California Executive Order N5620 that changed the timeline for LCAP, which I'll be explaining next. I won't read all this text here, but just to let you know, it is based on an executive order that we complete this report this June about how we responded to COVID-19. Next. So the timeline changes as a result of the executive order are now that we're in phase 1, our COVID-19 operations written report to be adopted by our board in June 2020. Then phase 2 is what we would have been doing this year, or right now in June, the LCAP plan for 2020-21. We would have been looking at a 3-year plan. That's now been changed, where next year, our LCAP will be a 1-year plan just for 2020-21. It does need to go through a regular LCAP process of stakeholder input and then come to the board for adoption in December 2020. Then phase 3, next spring. So starting pretty much in January of 21 through June of 21, we would be conducting a regular 3-year LCAP planning process cycle. So what we would have been doing this year has really been delayed by a year with some other elements in between. Next slide. So for this operations written report, it has 5 sections. One is an overview, then how we were meeting the needs of students, particularly the unduplicated pupils as LCAP focuses on, how we provided high quality distance learning, how we provided school meals, and how we provided student supervision if it was applicable. So the overview will be that we had a pandemic planning leadership team prior to school even closing to start coordinating our plan of action, our strategies, our resources. And we met as a leadership team 10 days before the official close of school and started work then. We have had regular communication updates with staff in the community and have a COVID-19 webpage that we created during this time. We have multiple committees currently working and have been working. for some time now to address our response to COVID-19, including, closing the school year, offering summer learning, and then how to reopen in the fall. We offered, as mentioned earlier, different ways to celebrate students, like our 8th grade promotion ceremony, drive-through, and the virtual EL ceremony for reclassification, and the yard signs for all 5th and 8th graders, which was fun to have those deployed and picked up and celebrated. And then summer learning program, which starts on Monday and is being offered as a 4-week distance learning program and was open enrollment for all grades TK through 7. In terms of meeting the needs of our students, this was also mentioned earlier. Thank you, Mr. Payton, about how we really, our staff, counselors, mental health therapists, teachers, our school engagement and foster youth liaison, our administrators were all doing outreach to families. So our school engagement and foster youth liaison did outreach to specifically to foster and homeless families. Principals coordinated with staff. They asked teachers, which students and families have you not heard from? Who have you had trouble making contact with? And then our administrators and counselors were calling and working to contact the families, as well as our engagement and foster youth liaison. And then there were referrals coming throughout the time of school closure to our school engagement and foster youth liaison. And we have created a robust community resources page on our district website and advertised it to families multiple times, as well as gotten the information to principals and teachers to share with families about food, shelter, childcare, health services, mental health supports, and the county 211 system.
Great.
In terms of distance learning, we're proud to say that we had Chromebook and Wi-Fi hotspot deployment within 3 days of school closures. And because we had planned ahead for school closures, our instructional coach team had prepared the paper instructional packets customized by grade level for 9 weeks of the closure time. And those were deployed immediately upon closures and every week thereafter. We, for the past 6 years, have invested in Google tools, for 5 years in iReady, BrainPop, Newsela. So our teachers had familiarity with those tools, and so did our students, and we were able to use those with distance learning. Teachers were responsive to emails and inquiries from students and their families. We created a hold harmless grading policy based on recommendation from state guidance, but there was an opportunity for student grade improvement. Any student who did work and engaged could improve their grades, but grades would not go backwards. And state testing was halted. Our state did that. And our district iReady testing for 3rd trimester was halted. But our AP Spanish students, 9 of them, chose to take the College Board's offer of a modified AP test. They did that from home. Next slide. The school meals, as was mentioned earlier, were fantastically offered to our families and being eaten, right? School meals, breakfast and lunch were provided daily, Monday through Friday, each week of school closures for any child age 0 to 18 in the community. We're proud to have offered that on spring break as well, and then began weekend meal service in May 2020. It was a drive-through pickup meal service. Staff were provided with masks. There was safe distancing with that method. We had 2 school sites for the offering of food, Romoland Elementary to the north side and Ethan H. Hayes to the south side of the district. And we also advertised the food banks and county food map on our district website. As for supervision of students, we did not offer supervision. Many districts did not. However, we did advertise on our district community resources webpage the county child care services that were posted. We advertised those to families, and I've listed their resources that are included on that webpage. So the operations written report will be a synthesis of that information in narrative form. It will just be a few pages long, but it will have that information detailed in there. And it will be on the June 23rd board agenda for your consideration for approval. And I welcome your questions or comments at this time.
I have a comment. Mrs. Weiss, I want to thank you and Mr. Payton and the entire staff for, and I don't think we say this enough, but for being steps ahead of and seeing this coming and the the prep that went into it. A lot of districts were left like fumbling around for 3 weeks, figuring out what they were going to do with their children. And I've heard so many stories about that. And once again, Romoland, rises above in those areas. And so compliments to the entire staff and your team for putting together a magnificent distant learning program.
Thank you. And I'll say also thank you for, this past 6 years of investing in the technology and iReady and other programs and our teachers' professional development so that people were ready to go.
You know what? Thank you for making that comment, because you're absolutely right. That had so much to do with the success.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Michelle, what role does the county play in this report?
Explain more. Tell me what you mean.
Like we submit our LCAPs to the county for approval or review. Do we have to do anything with this report, or does it go directly to the state?
That detail I forgot at the moment, and I will look into that and get you that answer.
Has the county given districts any guidance on how to write this, or is this
Very
left
much
up
so.
to the district?
There's a weekly distance meeting, 2:00 on Fridays, every single Friday that I've had with my support folks from the county for this creation of this document.
Okay, thank you.
And I just want to just concur with Marla's comments that I just believe I'm in education, and I think Romoland is one of the smoothest or seamless districts to go virtually online, and that the kids had a device and internet, and teachers knew how to teach and had curriculum to be able to teach online. So I'm in higher education, and they were struggling. So congratulations.
Thank you.
So if there's no other questions, I'm going to go to K2, planning for the school reopening 2020-21 presentation. And Ms. Wise, you're right back up.
It's me again.
Yeah.
Okay, this one I'll have some help with Mr. Murray on some slides later in this presentation. So I want to provide the board some updates about our work, gathering input from multiple stakeholders about plans for school reopening for 2020-21. And I will share with you today the results of a parent guardian survey that was deployed in May, the results of staff survey deployed this first week of June, and safety committee recommendations. There are committees meeting to discuss safety as well as the more academic and schedule side of school reopening. So those committees have, our union leaders, CSEA and RTA, as well as administrators, classified employees, teacher representatives. So here is this information. Here we go. So our surveys first, the parent guardian survey. We deployed a survey with a 10-day survey window, and that's the most responses I've ever had from any parent guardian survey ever, 1,300. And in the survey responses, all schools were represented and all grade levels were represented. And we also deployed a staff survey with a 6-day survey window after we had deployed the parent guardian survey, had a great response of 273 responses, all sites, including preschool and district office, as well as the schools, of course, excuse me, and all staff groups represented classified certificated administration. So there was a question about multiple models of teaching and learning. And 3 models were offered in terms of traditional full-time in-class schooling, hybrid, which is part-time on campus and part-time at home distance learning, and then a full-time distance learning model. Excuse me, I have a tickle in my throat. I'm like, not COVID, folks. So just allergies. So you see two sides of results here, and they look very similar, which is, interesting that the majority of both parents, guardians, and staff, about half, would prefer a traditional model, right? What we all know. And then the next section in red for both groups would be hybrid model, like the half and half kind of model. And then there is the orange or yellow wedge there for each that's about the same size for both parents, guardians, and staff of a full-time distance learning model. And though the percentages might look small, I do want to draw attention to number. For our parents, guardians, if we do 17% of our 4,200 students, yes, some of those are the same family, but 4,200 students, 17%, forgive my math, but it's about 700 children would represent the 17% of that yellow pie wedge there. And so while it might be small in percentage, that is a high number of students. Next slide. Parents, guardians, their primary reason for the choice of whatever three choices they chose, whatever of the model they chose, mostly is their preference, but then there's about a quarter that is based on health reasons. And we did not differentiate whether it's personal health reasons or fear of COVID, health issues, but just health reasons. And then student interest, what works for the student as a learner. And a small percentage was childcare. And the percentage did not appear on that green wedge in this screenshot I took of it, but it was about 5%. Staff they had some slightly different primary reason choices for their choice. Not applicable was the main one in terms of health reasons, or childcare didn't apply, but health reasons were for 38% of staff, and then 15% childcare. So then with the hybrid model, there was an offer of different preference for different types of schedules that our committee had discussed and put forward on this survey. 2 full days on school campus and 3 distance learning days weekly was the most popular choice. The second most popular choice was having 5 half days, like an AM shift and then a half day, PM shift, right? So the kids come for AM and do distance learning in the PM and vice versa. The 13.6% was for just a 1 full day on school campus and 4 distance learning days. And then you see there's a bunch of tiny color wedges that are hard to see and blend to white, but that was a bunch of people's responses for other types of models and comments that people put in. In terms of the staff selection of those offerings, the pie wedge colors are different on this, but the most popular was, like the parent guardian response, the 2 full days on school campus and 3 distance learning days. The second place choice was the 5 half days, just like on the parent guardian response. And then the 1 full day was also the smallest or least favorite for the staff. So this very much matched the parent guardian response. As did this. This was almost identical. So there's a last question we added that said, well, if we're offering traditional, would you choose traditional or would you want distance learning? This takes hybrid out of the mix. And right away, you see it's a complete match between parents, guardians, and then staff in terms of 1/3 wanting distance, but 2/3, a large majority of our families, want a traditional model. So that takes us to, what did we learn from the surveys? Overall, our families and staff want choice and options. And this is an opportunity for us to develop and expand our program options for students, families, and staff, and to continue our enrollment growth. And with that, I'll pause for a moment for any questions about the surveys. Go back one slide. Thank you, Vince. And then we'll talk about some safety aspects of this information as well. Any questions just about survey data so far?
I have a comment, Mrs. Weiss.
Yes.
Looking at what our parents in our community and also our staff, their preferences and choices. And I don't know how the rest of the board feels about this, but I definitely would like to encourage you to continue to look at all three of the models and see what would best, I know you have your committees out there, what would best fit, our families here in Romoland. That's my comment.
Thank you.
So Michelle, listening to what is being said, by the state of California and returning to school and things like that, what guidance is staff going to give us on where the parent and staff surveys fit into our decision-making process? Because prior to COVID-19, everybody was in a seat, for the most part. And there were no restrictions. With what's coming down, what I'm seeing is there are restrictions, but it's all about social distancing and face coverings and disinfecting and safety and things. Are those things going to be able to be mitigated so every student is back in a seat? Or is the staff going to have discussions to guide us on, no matter what the state says, we're going to allow choice in Romoland to whether you're in a seat or you're in distance or hybrid? What are you prepared and the staff prepared to do to give us guidance on how to best make that decision? Because essentially the board is going to have to decide, are we going back to school the way we have been, or are we going to offer a distance learning, hybrid, and seat-based model? So where are we at? And I during COVID-19, things changed every hour. Now things are changing every week or every day, based upon the data with respect to this virus. So what is the overall plan to provide us guidance to make a final decision? Because we're going to have to do that by July to say, hey, we're going to be doing this or that. So give us what your thoughts are. And Trevor, I don't know if you guys have actually talked about this, but you guys.
I have, Mr. Reller, so I'll chime in from my level, and then I'll let Michelle add to that. Yesterday, this California Department of Education produced almost 100-page guidance document, and it has a whole list of things that are discussed in there. I think the important thing that's being communicated by the state is they're offering guidance and not mandates, or recommendations and not orders. And they're very clear about that there are not going to be mandates coming. They're going to provide guidance across the state. The size of California, there could be different needs from county to county or region to region. So that's I guess the first layer. And we received that document yesterday. It came out. From a Riverside County perspective, for the past 3 weeks, we've been working in task force committees, and Riverside County will be producing their own guidance document that will have some similarities with the state document, I would imagine, but also have some nuances maybe for what's happening regionally versus across the entire state. And that guidance document will be vetted by Dr. Kaiser, our public health officer, so that we ensure as a county that there's no conflicting information in there with current county health guidance as well. But again, those aren't going to be mandates either, right? They're going to be recommendations and guidance for us to consider as we open up. we are unsure right now what social distancing means. The example would be in the state document that came out yesterday. They mentioned 6 feet of social distancing, but they also put a disclaimer in there to stay in tune with that should guidance change in the near future. So we don't know what, if that 6 feet of distancing will be in place once school starts in 2 months. And so, again, as you mentioned, information changing by the hour. It is still changing rapidly. The point being that they had to get some guidance out from which districts could operate from. And eventually what we would like to do is take those 2 guidance documents and craft our Romoland plan. And I will tell you that districts around the county are trying to operate in unison to the degree possible, but there are differences even within Riverside County. It's a big county. The Coachella Valley may have different needs than the city of Riverside or Riverside Unified or Romoland. So that's kind of where we're at. And then, what we're looking to do, and we're working in our committees, and it'll come out of committee, and then we'll start making recommendations to the board. And I would like to be able to do that at our board meeting in 2 weeks. Of course, we're not getting much time to work with our bargaining units on stuff because guidance just came out yesterday. And so we're going to engage in that task soon. And we've got a good head start on it because the committees have been wrestling with a lot of these issues. The problem is when last minute changes occur and then you have to change your plan and backtrack to your community the information you've provided. Michelle, do you have anything to add?
Well, I think you captured too the idea of the counties in our region or the districts in our region trying to move on some similar steps, right? And a timeline. And there is a theme of choice and options for families that is emerging from our area districts. So it is something for us to strongly consider, the choice of different schedules and options. And Mr. Murray will be sharing the safety committee's recommendations in the next 2 slides, and then we can go on with some more questions if needed. Next slide, Vince.
So this would be my section. So we have a safety committee that's meeting most every Thursday. We're trying to do it every Thursday, but we're also going to break it up into some smaller subgroups. So we might be meeting as the school year progresses or gets closer to us more often than just on Thursdays. But here are some of the things that we've already identified as needs for our school sites in preparation for opening up, or either over the summer for the district office, or opening up our school sites when we get into the regular school year. And one of the first things we identified was a school-wide disinfecting system. That it's actually a backpack system that our lead custodian can use, which should make it possible to disinfect the entire school using this particular system on a daily basis. We don't know if this is going to be required when we get to the point of having kids come back to campus, but it's something we saw as being a very helpful tool to use. And if it's required, we had to go through and purchase it now. So it's expected to arrive sometime this midsummer for use at the beginning of the school year. We've also ordered hand sanitizers for our classrooms and our common areas, cleaning wipes, disinfectant spray for classrooms. We're looking at adding plexiglass barriers at the front offices at each of our school sites. We've ordered some non-touch thermometers, just in case we get to a point where we need to do some kind of a check-in with each of our students as they come onto campus at the beginning of the school year to check for things such as our fevers. If you'd like to go to the next slide. We're also looking at another health screening tool because ultimately just having a fever would not necessarily be an indicator, but we're also having some health screening questionnaires for staff starting in the summer and probably extending that to students and families as we go into the new school year. And it's a common questionnaire that is used in many areas, but it's something we want to make sure that our families, our staff are kind of internalizing on a daily basis. We're also preparing for the training of our office staff to return for work over the course of the summer. And that's going to be kind of a template for bringing our overall staff back at the beginning of the school year. Even procedures for returning to work after an illness We have one set of expectations if it's an illness related to COVID, but even if it's just a regular illness, we want to make sure we get through the period of time where somebody is potentially contagious for whatever reason. We have a supply of face masks for students and staff. We were a little bit worried that we wouldn't get them in time, but they've already shown up at our school site or at the district office. So we already have the face masks. We ordered about 20,000 of them just to prepare for the beginning of the school year. We've also ordered face shields, a smaller number of them, just in case we have staff who would prefer to wear face shields over masks or instead of masks. I mean, that's kind of like based upon the interest and needs of the individual teaching staff. And although the last one I put down gloves for food service staff, it's something that our food service workers use on a daily basis, but they're having questions about whether we have gloves for those food service members, and they've always used them because it's kind of a requirement for food services in general, not just because of COVID. So these are some of the areas that we've talked about, we've already acted upon, and the next steps are some of the nuts and bolts of what we actually do in the classroom with kids in preparation for the school day. So we have a lot of work still ahead of us, but these are things that we had to get them in place. Otherwise, we may not have gotten them in time for the beginning of the school year. Do you have any questions for me?
I'd like to add a couple of points to Mr. Murray's bullets here, because I got an email, like we said, information is changing rapidly, right? So there were some reports that the state would be providing a lot of these things to every school across the state. And I hadn't heard that formally. I'd heard it more informally from some, maybe some news organizations or things, but we got some clarification a few hours ago that each school should receive basically 4 masks per student, 2 of those being disposable and 2 cloth masks. But they're scheduled to be delivered to the County Office of Education and then disseminated out to districts from there. And they also are providing 10 of the non-touch thermometers for schools as well to aid with the checking of fevers and things of that nature. The reporting that I had heard was a much more exhaustive list, but those are the 2 that are confirmed at this point.
So does anybody have any questions for me?
Yeah, I do. So talk a little bit about this disinfecting system. Would that be, I mean, that's just an idea. I know you have some on order. Is that for every school site, or is that just one for our district? Can you talk a little bit about it?
It's a backpack system. So we have one for each of our school sites. So every school will have a system. And basically it's almost like a spraying system you use for your yard to like fertilize your lawn. You put a tablet inside of a water solution, and then you just spray it on the surfaces, and then anything on that surface is disinfected. And this is something we would do in the afternoon at the end of the school day in preparation for the following school day. So students are coming into a kind of a fresh environment. And the initial expectation, and one of our lead custodians went out and kind of estimated how much of a school site he could do. And he does believe he can get an entire school site done in the afternoon after students leave the campus.
Okay,
So
thank you.
and it's something that's being used in hospital settings, other school site settings as well. And it may be something that becomes a bit more prevalent as time goes by. Well, before I leave this concept right here, you will be getting some more information as we go through the process over the summer, because we do have a lot of the detail work to go over. We even had a conversation today about athletic equipment. How are we able to incorporate that into the instructional program or into after school activities? So we have a lot of detail work still to do, but we've gotten some of the big areas already identified as, kind of checked off a little bit for the beginning of the school year. And then we have to work on how do we maintain the efforts over the entire school year, if that's a need that we have.
Are
So
you looking at CDC, which is regulations, and then OSHA, which is law? They have guidance, for every type of situation, including schools. I don't know if you're using that as a resource also, but there is a tremendous amount of good information in there. And then with OSHA, what you have to do by law. And there's quite a bit in there. So I don't know if you had that as a resource, but just a suggestion.
Some
We
of the
have,
things we are using.
one of our challenges is a lot of organizations are producing guidance documents and they don't always say the same thing. I know in the state guidance documents, they reference some of those organizations and the things that they cited. So I believe that they have checked those recommendations from OSHA as they were making their recommendations across the state.
Because it's changing so much. Everybody was changing their stories every day, or, the information. So that's good.
And one thing we're noticing more and more is that many of the ideas are no longer Band-Aids. They're recommendations, suggestions, and we kind of have to balance out suggestions versus what we think is really something we absolutely have to do. And that's where the tough part comes in. You have to make an informed decision about what we're actually going to implement, and that takes some thought and some contemplation.
And a lot of money.
Potentially, absolutely.
Absolutely.
I would like to just finish up my thoughts of, we've been getting communications from our parents and our community about the topic of opening school for next year. As I think sometimes with every obstacle comes an opportunity. And I think I'm open to utilizing this as an opportunity to start a program or to start a school in Romoland Elementary as a virtual or hybrid school, whether it has its own, and it would have to eventually have its own number, it to be its own school. But I think we should take advantage of our what board policies we have currently to ride this wave for a year to make sure that we meet the needs of all of our kids and our parents. And if there's an opportunity to learn, this year, and providing some hybrid or pure online learning to guide us in the future, I think we should take advantage of it.
Mr. Reller, to your point, we do have, it's a great kind of segue. There's some existing independent study board policy that aligns well, but also there's a batch of board policies tonight that are an information that we'll ask the board to vote on in 2 weeks that are related to distance learning and complement those independent study board policies quite well. And so I believe that as we go over these next 12 months, we analyze carefully that and we see if indeed that becomes a permanent solution that we ask the board to consider.
It would also give us an opportunity to maintain our ADA because, the online charter schools are just salivating to get our kids. And so if we have something that is rigorous and a good option for our families, it'll keep them from leaving.
I believe everybody I've talked to in the district and enrollments are how we generate our revenue to navigate budget challenges. And so whatever options we can provide to keep our enrollments up kind of is a top priority, because if your enrollments start declining, then you have bigger budgetary concerns.
And to answer your question earlier, Mr. Reller, and I said that it's a regional trend. People are considering multiple options in multiple districts. It's for some of the reasons you shared too. It's an opportunity to expand programs, but also about retaining the students we have and continuing to grow in our student enrollment. So thank you for letting me share this information tonight. And thank you, Mr. Murray.
Are there any other questions? Okay, then we're going to move on to K3, 2020-21 budget information. Ms. Cole to introduce this item.
Yes, good evening, board, cabinet, and any members of the community that might be listening in this evening. We're going to spend the next little bit of time reviewing and analyzing the 2021 budget for the Romoland School District. That of course includes the 1920 estimated actuals. Vince is going to be my driver. So thank you, driver, or Mr. Driver, Vince. You can go on to the next slide. So as we always do at the beginning of these reports, we orient ourselves as to where we are in the budget or the reporting cycle. And as you can see by the circle there, this evening we're going to be looking at the budget. We're going to be looking at the estimated actuals. But as a reminder, this evening is actually for you to receive information only. You will be asked to take action on the budget at the June 23rd board meeting in 2 weeks. So you're going to see some slides this evening that you have seen every time I have brought a budget to you. Normally, these are very predictable slides. We basically kind of gloss over them and then move on to the next slide. But tonight, some of this, what in the past would have been typical or normal information, actually carries a lot of importance for us. And this is one of those slides talking about the budget process for the 2020-2021 fiscal year. What normally happens when the state begins their budgeting process is that the governor comes out with a proposal in January and might make a few tweaks to that proposal, present it to the state in May. Depending on who the governor is, the Assembly and the Senate may make a few suggested tweaks or maybe some more major tweaks. And then then they negotiate with the governor, and on June 15th, the budget is adopted and either signed into law by the governor, or sometimes there are some line item vetoes. This year takes on a whole different look, and that of course is due to the COVID-19 pandemic. The proposal that Governor Newsom brought to us in January was basically upended, decimated, whatever word you want to use, by the time he got to the May revise. And that is, of course, because economies all over the world, local economy, state economy, basically shut down for a period of several months. And so the May revise that the governor brought to us looks extremely different than the original January budget proposal. To make this even more complex, the Assembly and the Senate are considering and have brought forth a proposal that looks very different from Governor Newsom's May revision. So that means that right now in June, the legislation and the administration are working behind closed doors to put together a budget, either the state, the legislatures, or the governors, or a combination of both. And at this point, we truly don't know what it's going to look like. We'll know on June 15th when the budget is signed into law. So what happens on the local side of the budget process? Of course, the minute we get the January proposal, we start crunching numbers and seeing what things are going to look like. We're always using our local assumptions and the information that we have at a local level, but our guiding information is that comes from the governor's January budget. Of course, we could see, as with the COVID pandemic, that things were not going to be the same, and the May revise, but we didn't know what that would be. We really didn't get information that was usable to us until just a few weeks ago. So we put all the pieces together, and that's what you're going to be seeing this evening as an information item. And then we'll talk more about this and the fact that we'll be bringing back a budget for adoption on June 23rd. So go ahead, Vince, next slide. So what we have been advised to do by the County Office of Education is to use Governor Newsom's May revise to build our budget. So, of course, what does that mean for Romoland School District? Let's look at the revenue side of this slide first. We are going on some assumptions that we have used for the last several years. And that is that we will experience about a 2% increase in enrollment in 2020, 2021, and that our ADA will be about 95% of that enrollment, because that has been very consistent in this district for several years. Our unduplicated pupil percentage for the upcoming year, which of course is based on our foster youth, our English language learners, and our low socioeconomic group of students, is in the low 70 percentile. Those are pretty typical numbers that we work with every year, percentage increases and so forth. What is a dramatic change for budgets across the state this year is the fact that not only are school districts not receiving COLA, there is going to be a net reduction to our COLA of 7.92%, which is, of course, significant. In January, we were thinking our COLA was going to be right around 3%. So effectively, this is a 10% reduction in our COLA. One of the things that Governor Newsom is proposing to offset this dramatic decrease is to provide school districts the one-time federal money, the CARES money that's going to be coming from the federal government. For this district at this point, it looks like approximately $3.4 million, which I have included in our budget. You'll see in the 2021, 2022, and the year following, we're still projecting a 2% increase in enrollment year over year, 95% ADA to enrollment, an unduplicated pupil percentage that stays just right above 70%. But the other thing that is creating a lot of difficulty for budgets is the fact that we were told to work with the assumption that there will be absolutely no COLA, a zero COLA in the 2 out years, which you'll see on the next slide has a significant impact over time. So when we look at the expenditure side of our budget and our multi-year projection, we always anticipate the cost of step and column, which for this upcoming year is $536,000. We use that same dollar amount throughout the 3 years because that's the only information we have at this point. One of the helps that Governor Newsom has offered is a reduction in the STRS and PERS rates. And I've shown for the 2 years, the next year and the year after, that does yield a savings to us in the budget year of $302,000 and in the second year, $513,000. And we typically staff based on our projected enrollment. So those are basically the assumptions, both the revenue and the expenditures for the budget year and the 2 out years. So Vince, if we could go to the next slide, please. This is the spreadsheet that you see at budget development time and also during the intervals during the year when we do our financial reporting. And I know it contains a lot of information, but what I'd like to do is start in the column, the first column on the left, entitled 2019-20 Estimated Actuals. And our estimated actuals are important because it tells us how we are estimating at this point in time, how we are going to end this fiscal year. because that ending fund balance is what tells us what our beginning balance will be for the upcoming year. So as you'll see, let me see, that's the 5th line down. It's the line entitled Ending Balance, or EFB. We have a healthy ending balance of $10.9 million. And of course, it's always important to look at those components of the ending fund balance below that turquoise line. We have sufficient to meet our 3.5% reserve, our restricted ending fund balances, our revolving cash account, as well as a little over $6 million in our assigned or reserved account. So moving on to column 2, that's titled 2020-2021, that's our budget year. You'll see that we are beginning the year with the prior year ending fund balance of $10.9 million. Now you look at the second line, that's our revenues. They look pretty healthy. And that's basically because the federal stimulus dollars are included in there. And of course, that is the $3.4 million approximately that we're receiving from the state. When we go down to our ending fund balance, we're still hovering at $10.6 million. And we've only, we are deficit spending, but really not by very much. And that truly is thanks to the stimulus dollars that we'll be receiving. When you look below the turquoise bar, you'll see that we again have sufficient funds for our reserve, our restricted balance, our revolving cash, and $6 million in our assigned reserved account. So now we move over to the third column entitled 2021-2022. So this is the first year of projection. This is the first year after our budget. And you'll see our beginning balance is $10.6 million, which was our ending balance for the budget year. Now you'll see here that our revenues begin to drop fairly dramatically here. And this is because we have a zero COLA in this year. Our expenditures are at $51 million, which gives us deficit spending of $4 million and an ending balance of $6.4 million. You'll see when you look below the turquoise bar that we still have the money we need for our reserve for economic uncertainties at $1.8 million. We're covering our restricted balance of 2.7, our revolving cash at 3,000. And we have a small amount of money, less than $2 million in our assigned reserved account. Now we go to the third year, our second year projections. That's the last column, 2022-2023 projected. So we start the year with $6.4 million, which is a significant reduction over the prior year. Our revenues are slightly better than the prior year, but not much. And of course, our expenditures have continued to go up. And at this point, we're projecting expenditures of almost $53 million. And our deficit spending continues to grow, and now we're at $4.7 million. That brings us to an ending fund balance of not quite $2 million. When you drop below the turquoise bar and you see our 3.5% reserve is at 1.8, our restricted is at 2.9, you'll see that we have a problem here in the third year out. So my next slide is going to talk about just our remedies going forward to address this. So just to summarize, our 2020, 2021, 21, 22 we're holding our own there. It's in 22, 23 that we need to bring some solutions to bear. Before I talk about those solutions, I do want to echo some things that have been expressed already in this evening's board meeting, particularly the fact that this board has obviously spent many years being fiscally prudent, being very careful with the money that is available, because there are districts in our very own county that are going to be in trouble, if not in the first year, in the second year. And so I just have to take a moment to thank the board for their focus on fiscal solvency, and that it really has positioned us for this time of some budgetary challenges. Next, I'd like to really commend Trevor's leadership, because once I shared these numbers with him, he saw immediately that we needed to start a conversation to reduce expenditures, to see what we could do to alleviate that third year and to get us back in balance. So with that in mind, he did form a budget committee that is comprised of RTA, CSCA, and management. We met on June 5th and we began a conversation to identify those areas where we might be able to make reductions. No decisions were made. It was basically just a very collaborative time of making an extensive list of the things that we might want to consider and bring to the board for consideration. That committee will meet tomorrow, actually, so that we can make more of a prioritized list. So going on to the next slide, Trevor and I talked about what it would take to get the budget back in balance in that third year. And there are, of course, multiple combinations of things that could get us there. This shows one scenario. This is actually a reduction of $1.5 million in expenditure beginning in the budget year. But this is only one possible solution for us. And I just show it to you as a visual that shows you how reductions in expenditures really get us to a much better place for the school district in that third year out. So now, Vince, going on to the next slide. The other thing that Governor Newsom is proposing to, this is really to assist the state, is to defer the cash that school districts receive. Let me just give you a little background on this. The majority of our revenue as a school district is received through the local control funding formula. That's money that's received from the state. And that amount for our district equals somewhere between $3 and $4 million. And we receive that money every single month. What Governor Newsom is proposing, first of all, is that he will not be giving us our state revenue in this month, in the month that we're in, the month of June. Rather, he will be deferring that cash payment until sometime after the start of the new fiscal year. They haven't told us exactly what month. I'm estimating it will be July or August. So the process that I need to follow in that case is to look at our cash, which I do every month anyway, and I look at the revenues that we're projected to receive, the expenditures that we're anticipating, and I see if we have enough cash to pay our bills. And what has been the very nice position that Romoland has been in is that we typically have a higher cash balance every month than the bills that we need to pay. Our cash balance ranges anywhere from $4 to $8 million a month. And so we're always able to have cash on hand beyond what our immediate costs are every month. So when I do that calculation for the end of the 1920 year, my cash flow tells me that there is no need for us to borrow money. We have sufficient cash on hand to pay all of our bills in June and to start the new fiscal year with about $4.5 million on hand. So we're in an acceptable cash position at the end of this year. The second part of Governor Newsom's proposal for deferrals is to defer all of the state revenue for the upcoming fiscal year in April, May, and June. Now, this is a significant cash deferral. And when I do a projection of our cash for 2020, 2021, we have sufficient cash on hand until the very end of the year. And we can't end a year, what I'm calculating is about $600,000 in cash to end this upcoming fiscal year. That is not going to work because you have to start paying bills right away in the next fiscal year. So you need to have sufficient cash on hand to begin that new fiscal year. So what we will, I'll just pretty likely have to do is borrow money sometime toward the end of the upcoming year to see us through into the beginning of the next fiscal year. Now, this borrowing money, deferral of revenues and borrowing of money, really bridge money, alone until you have enough cash to pay your bills, was something that was done routinely during the recession in 2008, around that period of time, because the governor had used deferrals during that time as well. So these are called, the borrowing, like a bridge loan, is typically called a TRAN, which is a tax revenue anticipation note. And what happens is I would do a projected cash flow estimate when I think we're going to need to borrow the money and about how much I think we're going to need. And then we work with the lending agency. They do their own cash flow. They make their recommendations. They advise when they believe they need to loan you the money, how much money, it's called a sizing, and then when they believe you will be able to pay the money back. And there are 3 well-known agencies in the state that specialize in this. I've also heard that our COE may be trying to do some kind of would be like a major TRAN that all the school districts might be able to tap into. I don't have any information on that, but I am familiar with the 3 agencies that school districts typically borrow from when they need cash. So Vince, let's move on to the last slide, or the next slide. We're almost finished here. What I wanted you to see was the difference between Governor Newsom's May revise and the legislative proposal, because we may see a hybrid of the two at the end of the day. So Governor Newsom's proposals are, his May revise, are on the left-hand side of the page. As you can see, he's proposing a 10% cut to K-12 education, a decline of 7.29% to LCFF. He's taking off the table the various education proposals that he had suggested in January. Again, he's proposing to utilize federal stimulus dollars to infuse school districts with money they'll need because of for learning loss mitigation. He is maintaining some additional state dollars for special education and the deferrals that we've already discussed. And as I showed you in our multi-year assumptions, the reduction of STRS and PERS rates for 2 years. On the right-hand side of the page is a legislator's proposal. You can see that the main difference is that they are proposing to fully fund LCFF and actually include a 2.31 COLA with the LCFF. They're stating they want to hold ADA harmless in the upcoming year, making one of the requirements of school closures that distance learning be provided. Again, increasing the special education rate. I didn't put it on the slide. Governor Newsom is proposing to reduce categorical programs by the 10% reduction. And the legislature is proposing to fund the categorical programs with a COLA. They're also proposing to use federal stimulus dollars. And one of the big differences with the legislature's proposal is that if those federal dollars, additional federal dollars, do not materialize in the fall, there would be an additional utilization of cash deferrals for school districts. So Vince, the next slide. These are my final thoughts, and it's a summary. There are kind of a lot of if statements as we work through that, and I apologize for that, but it's simply that we have so many unknowns that we are dealing with right now. As I've already shared with you, the budget that you viewed this evening is based on the governor's May revise, and this was as a result of the county's recommendation that those are the assumptions that we use. Now, we're anticipating the state budget, of course, to come out on June 15th. And if there is sufficient information, if it's been reduced down to a district level sufficiently, I plan to include that information in the June 23rd budget that's brought back to you for adoption. The other component that could be included in that June 23rd budget are the ideas and the suggestions that will be brought forth from the budget committee. So all or part of those things might be included in the in what I bring to you on June 23rd. There may not be enough time, there may not be enough information, which means that we would ask you to adopt the budget as is, and then bring back to you a revised budget within 45 days that would include any revisions we believe we need to make to the budget. And I just want to let you know at this point, the county is working very closely with me, and I'm sure with all districts in the county, understanding that this district is working its hardest to get us to a balanced budget in all 3 years. So this is the next slide is my last slide, Vince. Typically, this is the point in time when I am able to tell you what my recommendation is for the budget. I will make that statement at the June 23rd budget meeting, but these are the 3 possibilities, either a positive, a qualified, or a negative. The county is also saying that we could submit a conditional budget, which would mean that we know we've got some things to work on in that 3rd year out. We're working on them, and we would get that information to them as quickly as possible. Okay, that is the end of my presentation. My last slide just asks if there are any questions.
Does a conditional budget require us to say if we are positive, qualified, or negative?
It does not. We would simply be taking, I take that back, Gary. I think we would have to say that we believe we're going to be positive, we're going to certify positive, but at this point it's conditional with some revisions that we would be bringing back.
Does it come with any negativity going conditional?
It does not. It does not. It's really an acknowledgement that we are, we're going to get there actually, and at the, within the 45-day revision.
And another thing I want to add is CSBA is urging us, and you might be getting text messages from them, urging us to lobby to accept the legislature's budget and not the May revised budget.
Yeah.
Also, do you believe that the July tax deadline will have any impact on revenue?
I do, and I will be interested to see that. I really see this as being very much a phased budget this year. We'll have more information in, after June 15th, and I'll bring that to you. And I believe we'll have more information in August. And I do think it's going to have an impact. And, depending on timing, that may be included in our first interim. But I think you as a board are probably going to see at least 2, possibly more iterations of the budget.
So when you come to us in June, you'll tell us that we're going to certify positive, qualified, or negative, and you'll tell us why and what we're going to do to ensure that we can make our requirements in that third year.
Absolutely. Yes.
And then that will allow us to change our budget to a positive. Once we know what we're going to do.
Yes, that's right.
Looking back at the history of our district, I'm leaning towards positive with a condition.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, just by looking at it right now, but we can't do anything until the budget gets done.
That's right. That's really what we're waiting on at this point in time.
Mm-hmm.
I'll interject also a comment. Is one of the challenges is the legislators banking on federal dollars that, if they don't materialize, then you're making cuts in September, October, which is significantly more challenging. Or if they do materialize, we're already into the school year. And so it's an unknown for us at this time. Whereas Governor Newsom's approach just makes the cuts at the beginning. And if there is more federal dollars, then you're able to layer things back in over time.
So basically, Carol, we're going with the worst case scenario with Newsom's proposition, which I prefer as a district. And then if there is more money, that'll help take care of that last year or third year with our negative balance.
That is exactly right. Exactly right. You are exactly right. We are looking, as far as we know, at the worst case scenario at this point in time.
Great. Any other questions? Okay, thank you so much, Carol. That was very informative and helpful, and we have some work to do.
Yes, and thank you for your patience. I know that was a longer than usual, so I appreciate everyone's patience.
So we're going to go to K4, information regarding resolution number 31, 2019-2020, resolution of the Board of Trustees of Romoland School District ordering an election and establishing specifications of the election order. And Ms. Cole, we're going to ask you to introduce this item again.
Sure. And we're keeping Vince busy this evening because actually Miss Joy Coomer is with us this evening, and she is actually going to lead the conversation on the resolution as well as on the results of the community survey that was just completed. So I'm just going to hand it over to Joy to lead our conversation now.
Thank you.
Thank you, Carol, and thank you, members of the board. It's a pleasure to be with you this evening. I apologize if I'm moving a little bit. The sun is just shining right in my eyes. So I'm trying to find that happy spot as we do the video conferencing here. Tonight, I am here to talk to you not only about the resolution, just so that you have an opportunity to take a look at it, and perhaps I can answer any questions, or those that may need to go back to the attorney can always do that as well. But also just to provide an update on some of the outreach and communications that have happened. Obviously, the last time we met and spoke, it was a very different world. We were, meeting in person, and there were many meetings that were planned by district staff to go out and start talking, one-on-one with community members. We were also in the process of putting together our mailer and sending that out with a unofficial, unscientific survey, but which allowed anyone who wanted to participate to go to the district's website and participate in saying what items were important to them. We did send that mailer out, and the results we have here tonight. So not only did the mailer go out and we received responses online and through cards that were mailed back through the district, but we also, many members of the district also sent it out via principal newsletters and other means that were available so that they would see that online link and have an opportunity to participate as well. So if we can move to the next slide. As of today, we had received 165 survey responses. That may seem like a low number, but it is oftentimes that we see kind of a low response rate. As I sort of mentioned when we started this process, it's not uncommon to have people who feel very strongly. They're the ones who are most likely to respond. The rest may say, oh, look, the district sent us something and it's great. They're asking for our feedback, but we think they're doing a good job and I don't really need to respond to this. And that's probably how most people in your community feel. There are those that did respond, and as I said, those are 165 responses. The number of responses for each one may differ because people were allowed to rank them, whether they thought it was one of their top priorities and sort of move through. So each response in each category may not equal 165. It's just how many people rated it very highly. So the top community priorities from this survey were improved student safety and school security systems, and build a new school to avoid overcrowding. And then so priority number one, you can see how people ranked this overall and what the statement, support statement for this would be: improve student safety and school security systems. 103 people marked this as very high, 27 is medium, and 30 people marked it as a low priority. Perhaps they ranked something else higher, right? In this particular statement from our mailer, we did talk about school safety and security becoming a top priority for schools around the nation, and being able to provide funding for increased school safety and security measures. So the second one was building a new school, a new neighborhood school to avoid overcrowding. Again, the numbers are very similar here for the people who marked this as high. You can see here it's 99 people marked this as high, 19 is medium, and 42 is low. And again, those are just the supporting statements that were sort of included in there that we've been using as we talk about why building a new neighborhood school is important. So number three, this is another thing that we've used in our community outreach materials. And this was, construct, repair, and upgrade classrooms, science labs, school facilities that support instruction in basically STEM. And this really talks about both equity, across the school district, but also, making sure that all classrooms support all of those things that are important. And this just had a less intensity, I would say, 70 people marking it as a high priority, 43 as medium, 45 as a low priority. People were also given the opportunity to provide comments or quotes or, say anything that they wanted, because we knew that we had a few things listed there. We were trying not to promise too much. We were trying to actually say what we believed we could do if there was a potential bond measure. And some of the quotes and comments that came back, I just thought it was helpful for you to see those. You can see the first one says, "My grandchildren enjoyed their elementary school when they lived here in Romoland. I support and encourage an above average education for all students." Also a request to circulate materials in Spanish, which we did translate all the materials, and we have those available so that we can reach out to those Spanish speaking parents. And then the last one here is, "I have a 3-year-old child who will eventually be entering the school district. Overcrowding and safety are my concerns. A new school should help address those issues." I think that's the last slide on this portion of it.
Yes, that's the last one.
Thank you. So again, I just wanted to provide this to you so that you had some information about, what we've been hearing back from the community. Your next steps, of course, are to decide whether or not you'd like to move forward with a potential GO bond. I believe you received the, Carol, please correct me if I'm incorrect, but I believe everyone has a copy of the draft resolution. So we have worked with your law firm and your financial advisors to pull together the resolution that you would ultimately need to vote on for this to appear on the ballot. And really, I wanted to provide you with an opportunity to ask any questions about that resolution. I don't believe the vote is tonight. This is just kind of our first opportunity to review it and answer any questions.
Are there any questions? If not, then we're going to move forward. Carol, did you have anything else? Somebody's talking. Trevor, could you see who was talking, or are we moving on?
So, I think this isn't an item tonight, it's just an item. I point out that the exhibit A and exhibit B are the meat of the way some of the language is, you can't really change it by lawyers because it was on the ballot. And then other things we have a little bit of ability on. But I think it captures the essence of what we talked about in our study sessions. Really facility, and either new school facilities, but also
We're going to see if we can disconnect and reconnect.
Okay, thank you.
Get this going. 1 second.
Okay. He'll get right back to us.
you guys hear me better now?
Oh, so much better, Trevor.
Sorry, I was talking, I was giving you some great information. I didn't realize nobody could hear me. So I'll try to repeat it as eloquently as I talked the first time. So tonight's not an action item, it's an information for the board. I think the essence of the draft resolution are Exhibit A and Exhibit B. Exhibit A is language drawn up by lawyers that would appear on a ballot. It really is difficult to change that language. Exhibit B captures what we've talked about in our past board study session on our facilities needs, right? So the need for a new school, the need to upgrade safety and security measures on our campuses, and then also the potential need for our existing schools to expand and upgrade until a new school can be built, right? And so it kind of addresses those three areas, and we'll be bringing it back to the board in a few weeks and asking the board to consider approving it.
Okay. Thank you. Any questions before we move on to the consent agenda? Okay. Consent agenda, we have item L3, the certified personnel assignment order, number 11, 2019-2020. Attachment needs to be amended to include the updated attachment. Mr. Murray, can you explain the amendment that's as it's presented today?
Yeah, so we had the personal order prepared for you on Friday afternoon. It was sent out in the public notice, but we had an addition to that personal order that was received since our Friday posting. So this includes that one additional item.
All right. Do I hear a motion to accept the amended certificated personnel assignment order as presented?
I'll make the motion.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, and then all in favor?
Aye.
I have a quick question. Is the amended one correct on the agenda, the electronic agenda, or where's the correct personnel order? Is it online?
I think Nikki just stepped out, so let me see if I can grab her to answer that.
I have a personnel order opened up on my computer, and I just want to make sure that's the correct one. What was the amendment?
We had a fourth resignation.
Okay. Gotcha.
Mr. Reller, I've got Nikki right here if you wanted to restate your question.
Mr. Murray answered it. Just adds another resignation. I'm good with that. I just wanted to double check that there weren't any new hires or anything that I was missing.
I think you have it.
Okay, so do I hear a motion to approve the amended consent agenda as presented? I'll motion. Does anybody want to have a second?
Second.
I'll second it.
Any discussion?
John, can you tell us a little bit about our new certificated employees?
The new certificate employees, they happen to be our new employees for the RISE program. So, although we're trying to be very selective on hiring right now, we had a definite need in the RISE program for special education staff, and that is the majority of our new hires right now. We also have an SLP on the list because we realized we had a need to provide additional SLP services to our students, and this is going to fill the void, particularly within the preschool program.
Excellent. We're lucky to get an SLP.
Absolutely.
Do we have any more discussion? Then I'm going to call on each of you for all in favor. Mr. Gary?
Aye.
Mrs. Kleitz?
Aye.
Mr. Reller?
Aye.
Mr. Sperry is absent, and I for Miss Moon. We're going to move on to our action items. M1, Student Disciplinary Matters, Education Code Sections 49070 and 76232. Ms. Weiss to explain this item.
At this time, we ask you to consider the reinstatement of student number 001-2019-2020 for reinstatement to the Romoland School District Regular Education Program, and for this student to the Academy Program.
Thank you. Do any board members have any comments or questions? Do I have a motion to approve?
I'll make a motion.
I'll second.
Excellent. You guys are good at.
Perfect.
All in favor, Mr. Geary,
Aye.
Mrs. Kleitz,
Hi.
Mr. Reller,
Aye.
Mr. Sperry's absent, and I for Mrs. Moon. Next item is M2, approve 2019-2020 resolution numbers 19-28, resolutions of the Board of Trustees of the Romoland School District, acting as a legislative body for community facilities districts, numbers 91-1, 2001-1, 2002-1, 2002-2, 2004-1, 2006-1, 2006-3, 2016-2, 2017-1, and 2017-2. Ms. Cole to explain.
Yes. So board approval of these resolutions is required in order to place the taxes on the county tax roll for the upcoming year. This is something that is done annually.
Thank you. Do any board members
I'll
have
make the
comments?
motion to approve.
Okay. Does anybody have comments or questions first? Okay. And Gary has made a motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay. All in favor, Mr. Gary,
Aye.
Mrs. Kleitz,
Hi.
Mr. Reller, Mr. Sperry is
Aye.
absent, and Mrs. Moon, aye. M3, resolution number 29, 2019-2020, resolution for year-end budget adjustments. Ms. Cole to explain this item.
Yes, this is an annual resolution that's required by the County Office of Education, and it allows us to make budget transfers and adjustments at the end of the year.
Thank you. Do any board members have any comments or questions? Okay, do we have a motion to approve?
A motion.
And do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, all in favor, Mr. Gary,
Aye.
Mrs. Kleitz,
Hi.
Mr. Reller,
Aye.
Mr. Sperry is absent, and I for Miss Moon. M4, resolution number 30, 2019-2020, resolution ordering consolidated governing board members biennial election, specification of the election order and request for consolidation. Mr. Payton to explain this item. Is Mr. Payton here? Oh, you're on mute. Oh, Trevor.
All right, here we go.
There you go.
So we're requesting approval of resolution 30. It is a consolidated governing board member biennial election, which is mandated by education code.
I'll go let him know.
Whenever a district
Thank you.
has trustee areas are for election. So, can you hear me again?
Not very much.
No, we cannot hear you.
Can you hear me?
No, it's broken up.
Poor
He's
Trevor.
going to log in and then log off and then log back in.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Okay, can you hear me better this time again?
Perfect.
Apparently, when I
Yes.
log out and log back in, you can hear me for a period of time. So we're requesting approval of resolution number 30, ordering consolidated governing board member biennial election, which is mandated by education code whenever a district has trustee areas that are up for election. The election is scheduled to be held on Tuesday, November 3rd, 2020, to elect 2 members of the governing board, trustee area 2, Manuela Geary, and trustee area 4, David Sperry, for the full term ending December 12th, 2024. The approval of this resolution will confirm our acknowledgement of the election requirement and initiate the process with the county registrar of voters.
Great. Do any board members have comments or questions? Do I hear a motion to approve?
I'll motion.
I'll second. Oh, good, thank you. All in favor, Mr. Gary,
Aye.
Mrs. Kleitz,
Aye.
Mr. Reller,
Aye.
Mr. Sperry's absent, and I, Miss Moon. M5, approval of student device purchase award to cover Converge One. Mr. Butler to explain.
Sure. So I just wanted to start with a quick recap of our classroom technology standard to kind of set the stage for this item. So our classroom technology standard is a component of the district's annual LCAP, and it provides 1-to-1 student devices for 3rd through 8th grades and 2-to-1 student devices in kinder through 2nd grade. So through the support of the LCAP funding, we refresh a portion of our elementary Chromebooks every year when they have exceeded 5 years of age. This ensures that these devices are keeping pace with current instructional needs. And a portion of this purchase will serve this annual practice, as well as provide devices for 2 new classrooms. So that's the LCAP portion of this item. This year, we're also anticipating a need to, well, let me rephrase that, next year, I'm getting a little lost there, 2021, we're also anticipating a need to provide additional devices beyond our classroom standard so that we can avoid sharing devices in our TK through 2 classrooms and possibly to support distance learning. So we need to bring our TK through 2nd classrooms up to that same 1-to-1 device level. So to achieve this, we're going to repurpose the 5-year-old devices that we are refreshing from other classrooms this year. And then we would also need to purchase some additional new devices to fill that gap. We can use restricted Title I and Title IV funds for these additional student devices, since this is a temporary supplement to our classroom technology standard, not a permanent modification to our standard. So if you have any questions, I can answer them at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Butler. Do any board members have comments or questions? Do I hear a motion to approve?
I'll motion.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
All in favor, Mr. Aguirre,
Aye.
Mrs. Kleitz,
Aye.
Mr. Reller,
Aye.
Mr. Sperry is absent, and then I, Miss Moon. Then in information 2, in 1 first reading, board policy updates for March 2020 and April 2020. Mr. Payton to explain this item.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, I didn't mute my computer in between this time. These are just normal board policy updates. I mentioned earlier, there'll be information this time and requests for approval in 2 weeks, our next board meeting. So it'll give you time to take a look at them. A lot of them have to do with COVID-related closures and the various departments and how they respond. I mentioned earlier that there is a board policy related to distance learning that would complement our existing board policy for independent study that will help us in some of those learning models that Ms. Weiss shared earlier based on our survey results.
Thank you. So board member closing comments. Mr. Gary, any closing comments?
Nothing.
Mrs. Kleitz,
No.
Mr. Reller,
No.
and none for myself. So our regular board meeting is adjourned at 8:21 p.m. Thank you.